Welcome to Quantumly Kinky with Veda, where we talk about sex, Chinese medicine, and character development for the multidimensional you.
Episode 9, The Theater of Self, How Cognitive Reframing Unlocks Erotic and Emotional Freedom. Welcome back, kinksters. Here we are again, carving out space together for our weekly sexy sermon, where we love to challenge what we've been taught, to see ourselves differently, and to push the boundaries of how we engage with our own desires. My hopes for you are that when you listen to these episodes, you are relaxed, taking some deep breaths, and ultimately thinking of them like your weekly sexy meditation. So last week in episode 8, we pulled apart the psychology of kink and the erotic shadow. We looked at some of the hidden forces that shape power, taboo, and repression. So today, we're not just exploring what lives in the shadow, but actively shifting how we see it. Cognitive reframing is one of the most powerful tools we have, and in kink, it's pretty much everything. The same sensation, pain, restraint, surrender, it can feel like trauma, or it can feel like transformation. So in this episode, we're questioning the ways we've been taught to see our own experiences, especially the ones stamped as trauma or dysfunction. We're breaking down how cognitive reframing allows us to shift those narratives, not by bypassing what we've been through, but by renegotiating the meaning we've assigned to it. We'll also explore how the body holds on to trauma, how the mind reinforces it, and how conscious re-identification can disrupt these old patterns, transforming what once felt like a cage into a space for play, reclamation, and release. So let's get into it. So let's think of the shadow and cognitive reframing in kink and BDSM. Thomas More speaks of the shadow not as something to be eradicated, but as a necessary part of wholeness. And in the realm of kink, this principle comes to life in a very tangible way. Kink practitioners have long mastered the art of cognitive reframing, and they use it as the ability to construct mental frameworks that separate play from real life. This isn't just a psychological trick. It's actually a sophisticated act of meaning making, a deliberate rewiring of perception that allows us to step into heightened, even transgressive experiences while maintaining a sense of agency and control. And the researchers out there that have been studying altered states of consciousness and trauma reprocessing, they're recognizing this as a fundamental mechanism of cognitive flexibility. I like that. Cognitive flexibility. The mind's capacity to shift perspectives, recontextualize sensations, and assign new meanings to experiences that might otherwise be coded as distressing or disempowering. Within kink, this process isn't just theoretical, it's embodied, it's experienced. Through this intentional framing, what could be perceived as pain becomes catharsis. What might register as control becomes surrender. And what has been historically labeled as trauma has the potential to be rewritten as power, reclamation, and self-determined expression. This is really just the same mechanism that actors use when stepping into a role, a carefully crafted container that lets us explore without fear of losing control of who we think we are. So engaging with kink through this lens, it gives us permission to touch the parts of ourselves that might otherwise remain hidden. When we consciously step into roles, whether dominant, submissive, primal, or something entirely different, we aren't losing ourselves. We're allowing aspects of our multidimensional psyche to come forward and to be witnessed. And when we do this with intention, we transform repression into expression. Let's take a deep breath together. The emotions and energies that we might otherwise push down, fear, anger, desires, vulnerability, are now given space to move, breathe, and be transmuted. This is crucial to understand in the context of our trauma. One of the biggest buzzwords in modern discourse, trauma. And while trauma is often framed as this abstract psychological wound, at its core, it's energy. It's stagnant, trapped, and unresolved energy within the body. Trauma isn't just a memory or an emotional imprint. It's a physiological state. It's a dysregulated nervous system looping in a holding pattern, unable to complete its cycle of release until you command it to do so, just like a damn good dom. The body is designed to move energy. When an overwhelming experience occurs, the natural impulse of the body is to shake, to cry, to scream, to express in some form. Yet, social conditioning and some survival mechanisms often suppress these responses, forcing that energy inward where it hardens, waiting for an outlet, a release, acceptance, to be seen, to be felt. And without an intentional means of release, these energies begin to manifest as hardened tension, anxiety, chronic pain, numbness, or just an overall sense of disconnection from self. But conscious role exploration, whether in kink, performance, ritual, or deep embodiment practices, it provides a safe and intentional framework for these energies to be expressed. When we step into archetypal roles, we are not just playing. We are actually giving these unintegrated parts of ourselves permission to surface and complete their cycle. For example, the submissive may surrender into a state of deep trust, releasing control they were never allowed to let go of in childhood. The dominant may finally step into their power, claiming space they were once denied. The primal may shake, growl, writhe, and breathe in ways that were once deemed too much, reclaiming a body that was stifled by societal restraint. The fear that was once frozen becomes fluid. The anger that was swallowed whole finally fucking roars. The desire, that desire that was denied, well, it ignites into life force energy, charging the body with vitality. The vulnerability that was guarded now becomes a portal to deeper intimacy, both with the self and with others. Because healing is not just about understanding or intellectualizing our wounds. It's about moving the energy they left behind out of the body. You see, expression is the medicine. Movement, breath, sensation, voice, connection, they're all tools of transmutation. And trauma, it's eroding our culture because we've become hyper fixated on pathologizing it, fixating on it, rather than moving it through the body and releasing it. Instead of seeing trauma as stagnant energy that can be transmuted, we've built these identities around it, keeping us stuck in cycles of victimhood rather than empowerment. Keeping us stuck in cycles of victimhood rather than empowerment. So we're not just releasing trauma here. We are reclaiming the full spectrum of our embodied aliveness. So let's get into the alchemy of repression into expression. First, think about this. Think about the energy that it requires to suppress something within us. Whether it's the urge to surrender, the need to be in control, or the hunger for intensity, repression is exhausting. It's like holding a beach ball underwater, and sooner or later it's going to explode to the surface in ways that we cannot predict or control. But when we engage with these parts of ourselves consciously, we give them space to be processed, and processed in a way that's safe, intentional, and even pleasurable. This is where BDSM and kink rituals become powerful tools of emotional integration. A well-negotiated scene can be a way to engage with buried emotions in a controlled environment. A submissive who carries guilt or shame might find catharsis in a ritual of punishment. A dominant who struggles with people-pleasing might step into their power in a way that feels deeply healing. So this play, when consciously framed, it becomes a sacred space of self-exploration. So from a Chinese medicine perspective, trauma is it's a psychological wound, but mostly it's just a form of stagnation, stuck chi or energy that inhibits flow, that inhibits your vitality and the ability to fully express yourself in your body and in your life. And stagnation in Chinese medicine is often associated with repression. When emotions, desires, and experiences are not expressed or metabolized properly by the body, they become lodged in the body. And this always leads to disharmony. The liver in Chinese medicine, which governs the smooth flow of qi, and it's closely tied to emotions, and it's particularly susceptible to this type of stagnation. So over time, this starts to manifest as frustration, depression, pain, or a really strong sense of disconnection from one's own will. Or a really strong sense of disconnection from one's own will. In essence, repression creates a dam in the body's energetic system, limiting self-expression and limiting our sexual vitality. So basically, repression is the antidote to a turned-on life. Expression is the key. So back to Thomas More. He draws from this deep understanding of depth psychology, mythology, and spirituality, and he speaks to the importance of embracing the soul's complexity, especially the aspects that are deemed dark by society. And he advocates that what is often labeled as shadow or taboo is not meant to be eradicated, but rather integrated and expressed in ways that honor the full spectrum of human experience. And this full spectrum of human experience he's referring to, we like to call our multidimensional expression. This also aligns with the Taoist perspective in Chinese medicine, which does not see darkness as something to be feared, but as a part of the cyclical nature of life, essential for balance. The balance of yin and yang, light and dark, rest and action, receptivity and expression. It's all essential for vitality. As true health and turn-on arises from this dynamic interplay rather than the dominance of one over the other. So this is about light and dark playing instead of dominating one over the other. And kink, when engaged with consciously, becomes a very powerful cognitive reframing tool that allows individuals to transform repression into expression. Or said another way, it can help allow us to release our trauma. Kink can offer a structure where what has been shamed or hidden can be brought into the light, and not in a chaotic or destructive way, but in a ritualized, intentional space where it can be explored safely. And within this framework, pain, power dynamics, and surrender become avenues for liberation rather than sources of suffering. And the very things that society deems, quote, dark or wrong, become keys to deeper self-awareness, agency, and intimacy. This is a pretty radical way to move stagnation through play, through our sexual exploration. And if repression leads to internal congestion, like in Chinese medicine, qi and blood becoming stuck in the liver, the heart, the kidneys, well, kink can act as this powerful intervention that restores movement, removing stagnation, turning repression into expression. So in this way, when approached with awareness and intention, this is really about an alchemical process. It transmutes repression into erotic sovereignty, stuck qi into flowing vitality, shame into embodied self-acceptance. It's taking what has been hidden in the shadows and reframing it as something sacred, deeply human, and ultimately freeing. Just as in Taoist alchemy, where raw energy is refined into higher states of being, the engagement with one's own dark desires through BDSM or kink becomes a practice of self-cultivation. It becomes an honoring of the multidimensional spectrum of existence rather than a denial of it. This is the very essence of both Thomas More's philosophy and Chinese medicine's understanding of emotional health, which is the path to wholeness is not through suppression, but through integration and expression. Stagnation dissolves not by avoidance, but by movement, by finding safe, conscious, and deeply personal ways to give form to what was once formless, turning what was once hidden into something illuminating in your life. So let's step into the director's chair for a moment, because whether we realize it or not, we're all actors in this multidimensional play of life. The problem is, most of us just don't realize we're stuck in a single role. But what if we could consciously step in and out of our characters instead of being ruled by them? So now I'm going to talk to you about 4 ways to use cognitive reframing in your everyday life that can help us create more erotic play and fulfilling passion and excitement. And remember, cognitive reframing, it's really just this fancy way of saying changing your perspective and the lens in which you view something. So here are the 4 ways. Number 1, recast your role in relationships. Every interaction that you have carries an unspoken script. Are you always playing the caregiver, the rebel, the one who needs saving? Just like in kink, when we negotiate roles and limits, we can bring that same awareness into daily life. Try asking, what if I approached this situation as a different version of me? Just experiment with shifting dynamics and see what opens up. Number 2, simply playing with cognitive reframing. So a scene in a film is just a scene, right? It's not the whole story. Well, the same goes for our experiences. Instead of seeing challenges as fixed realities, what if we reframe them as a part of a character development unfolding before us? What lesson is this moment offering? What happens if we lean into it like an improv exercise instead of resisting it? Play allows us to engage without being consumed. Number 3, use ritual to step in and out of performances. So in kink, we use safe words, aftercare, rituals to transition in and out of intense experiences. In daily life, we can do the same. Maybe it's something as simple as a gesture, a mantra, or a literal change of clothing that can help us shift identities. But the key is recognizing I am not just this role. I am the one choosing to play it. And number 4, make room for all of your desires. When we cling too tightly to a single identity, we reject parts of ourselves that don't fit. But if we let those aspects have their time on stage, well, that doesn't mean acting on every impulse, but it does mean acknowledging them as valid parts of our psyche. What if my desires weren't problems to solve, but characters to understand? So, when we see ourselves as multidimensional beings, life becomes way more fluid. Kink, shadow work, and erotic play are not about getting lost in fantasy. They're about learning to move between realities with ease. The more we can embrace this flexibility, the less we will get trapped in rigid identities that keep us stuck in old, traumatic patterns. Let me say that one more time. The more we embrace this flexibility, the less we get trapped in rigid identities that keep us stuck in old, traumatic patterns. So, babe, consider this your permission slip to play, to try on new roles, to step behind the scenes and rewrite the script when you need to. Because the more we can embrace the theater of life, the less we get caught in its illusions. So, until next time, stay curious, stay turned on, and most of all, start exploring how many roles are actually available to you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Quantumly Kinky with Veda. Stay turned on. Till next time.